Hello, I'm Kuljit Bamra. In this episode, we'll be looking at Tabla Touch in detail. We will look at the external features of it, and also I'll plug it in and we can explore the sound banks and the settings and what all these buttons do. But before we do that, I'd like to say a very big thank you to all the people who are following this YouTube channel. My last video reached 2.7 million people in 3 or 4 weeks, which is amazing. So thank you very much for showing an interest in this instrument. So let's have a look at the external features of Tabla Touch. It has 2 drum heads, just like an acoustic tabla. These drum heads are specially made. They are not made of skin. They're made of a resilient material, which is harder than skin, but the heads are floating on a spring. So when you play them, you'll hear later on, they still feel like an acoustic tabla. There's a control panel here, and we're going to go through all these buttons and dials very shortly, one by one. The base is made of solid oak wood, and on the back you can see there's a plate where you can connect a special plate to mount it on a drum stand. We will talk about that as well. And the end panel has your connecting ports. So we have a 3.5mm headphone socket. We have a power supply. We have your jack lead, which plugs into here and goes to your mixer or your amplifier. And we have a USB MIDI socket. Now, this is an electronic tabla, so it won't make a sound on its own. It has to be plugged into an amplifier. Before we look at the internal features of Tabla Touch, let me say a few words about how to mount it on a drum stand. Now, if you are an early bird customer and you've already bought Tabla Touch or you're thinking of buying one, what you'll get in your box is, obviously you'll get Tabla Touch itself, but you will also get a Keda stand plate, and this will enable you to attach it to a drum stand. There'll be 4 screws supplied with this. They will screw onto the bottom plate, and then you can put this into the holder of your drum stand, and then you can play seated or standing. I'm going to put this Tabla Touch onto this plate now, and then we'll look at the functionality and the menu items and turn Tabla Touch on. Okay, so I've now mounted Tabla Touch onto a drum stand using the plate that I showed you earlier on, and I've adjusted the height so it suits me. Now, I know many people have commented on the fact that Tabla Touch can't tilt like a normal tabla does, but for me this is perfect. And also I just want to say that the reason we tilt the tabla in the first place is so that when we're sitting on the floor we can tilt it so we can apply pressure to get louder sounds. If you're a tall person, then you'll be higher up the tabla than maybe a shorter person, so you need to tilt the tabla away from you. Whereas a shorter person, like when I was 6 years old playing tabla, I was short, I wanted to tilt the tablas towards me so I could reach it. I couldn't tilt them away. So what I'm saying is the combination of height adjustment and overall tilt, with those 2 things, you can find a position that suits you very well. So let's look at the menu screen and the functions that Tabla Touch has built inside electronically. So I've connected Tabla Touch to the power supply, obviously, because it's on, and I have a jack lead going to my amplifier back here. If I wanted to, I can also have headphones on at the same time, which are independently controlled. But let's look at the main screen. When you first turn the unit on, what do you see? So when you first turn Tabla Touch on, you're presented with this screen, and the screen shows you immediately the tunings of each of the drums. So at the moment, my larger drum, my Bayan, is tuned to a D, and also the smaller drum is also tuned to a D. What you can also see on the main screen at the top is the name of the drum that I've chosen, which in this case is tabla set number 1. I've got a volume either side, and the volume is controlled by this button here. So if I do this, you'll see the volume rise and fall. Similarly, on this drum, there's a volume rise and fall. And also, there is a master volume. So once I have fixed my balance that I like, I can adjust the overall master volume of that output. So we have the name of the instrument, the individual tunings of the drums, and also I can change the pitch now if I wanted to change the pitch, and the pitch buttons are these ones here. There are two types of selections that the screen allows you. There is a sound selection and there's a setting selection. The sound selection allows you to scroll through the menu of sound banks. So let's look at that first, and then we'll look at the settings section. So with the main cursor button, which is the one at the bottom here, I'm going to select sounds, push it down, and then I'm presented with 5 pages worth of sound banks. There are 15 sounds altogether. I'm going to scroll through them one by one. There's a tabla set 1. If I scroll down, there's a tabla Pakistani set. I'll keep going. There is Bakawaj, a very low sounding drum. There's also a tabla tarang set in which the instrument now becomes divided into zones. So if I was to choose that by pressing the button, if I go to conical, it also allows you to hear the sounds of the balls or the tabla mnemonics that we use when we're learning tabla, and that's very useful if you're learning to play tabla for the first time. Na, 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 ta, 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 ti, t, tu, na, ga, 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 k, ti, t, k, ti, tu, na, ga. We have a Dolak set 1, Dolak set 2, Shri Call, a Guttam set number 1, Datum set number 2. And those are the sort of Indian drums. Now we're going into metallic sounds. And by metallic sounds, I mean things like janj, manjira. You can see here we have finger cymbals, Tibetan bowls, temple bells, and mallet's pan. So just to summarize the sounds, there are drum sounds, tabla, pakawaj, dholak, khol, and there are also metallic percussion sounds such as bells, manjira, janj, and finger cymbals. Okay, so I'm now going to press the back button. So I'll use the main button to scroll down, choose back, and that was the sounds section we've just explored. What we're going to do now is look at the settings. And these are functions that allow you to tailor the tabla touch to your particular unique way of playing. So you might be someone who's heavy-handed, you might be someone who's light-handed, you may be someone who's left-handed. So all those main features are under the settings section of the menu. So I'm going to choose settings now, push the button down, and the very first one that comes up is called sensitivity. Now, if I was to push the cursor and select sensitivity, I'm presented with a picture or a symbol of each of the drums. If I push it again, I get a dial, and I can increase the sensitivity of each of the drums according to my strength of playing. Now, I just would like to say that one of the beauties of having an electronic tabla is we don't need to play it so hard. And that's also one of the reasons I've called it Tabla Touch, because it's a lighter touch. If you want to make it louder, you don't need to play it harder. You just need to turn the volume up on the amp. And you can have the volume as loud as you want. You can, even on the amp, adjust your bass and treble according to your preference. So it is Tabla Touch, and it's a lighter touch instrument, and that's the reason we called it that. We didn't call it Tabla Hammer or Tabla Elephant Foot or something like that. It's called Tabla Touch for a reason. So this is the sensitivity section. And as I say, if you're someone who is heavy-handed, then you can reduce the sensitivity of the drum, because applying too much force to one of the drums could cause the other one to vibrate as well unnecessarily, which we'd like to avoid. So let's go back, and I'm going to go back into the settings section. We've done sensitivity. The next item is called audio out. Now, if you use a stereo jack plug, you can choose to have a mono signal out, which means dia and baya, a smaller drum and larger drum, are combined as a one signal audio out, mono out. Or if you wanted to, and if I press this button, you'll see that it changes from mono to split. And what that does is it splits each of the drums so that if you're wearing headphones, you would hear one of the drums in one side and the other drum on the other side. And also, if you were using a stereo jack lead, at the mixer end or at your amp end, you could have a separate channel for each of your drums, and you can then have ultimate control over the EQ or the settings to your preference. So for the moment, I'm going to choose a mono mode because I can adjust the balance here anyway, and for this demonstration I don't need to go into so much detail and control. The next item in the settings section is something called reset. Now, what happens with Tabla Touch, because it's so sensitive, it's very useful to have a reset function so that the sensors can then calibrate themselves again. So if I just demonstrate that now, I'm going to choose reset, and then immediately it says it's done, and I press it again to go back to the screen. So let's go to settings again, and the next item is called left-handed. At the moment it says left-handed no, because I'm right-handed. If I was to be a left-handed player, I would select this item, and if you look at the screen closely, I'm going to press this, and immediately the screen flips the other way around for a left-handed player. Not only does the screen flip, but all the configurations and the way the drum is configured in terms of zone and sensitivity, they are also inverted to suit a left-handed player. So let me just press that again and go back to right-hand mode. The next setting is called slide force. Now, slide force is when we make the sound gur and slide. I would, because it's Tabla Touch, I would suggest that you come in gently with the slide. So I would come in like this. So when my heel lands down, I'm landing gently. So if you're somebody who comes in with a heavy hand, you can select this item, press the cursor menu button, and it will become slide force hard. And what that does is, at this area here, it will make it slightly less sensitive so that it doesn't recognize your heel of your hand landing as a strike. But again, I would urge you to train yourself to come in gently when you slide. And in fact, when you first play Tabla Touch, you're automatically sort of led to do that. So that's that, which is, I'm going to put it back to soft again. And the final item in settings is fine tuning. At the moment, it's set to a universal standard of 440 Hertz. If you are playing with a band or musicians that have tuned differently, you can then adjust this in increments. So if I select this item here, I can then go up in increments, but I think it's best to leave that at 440. Most instruments around the world generally tend to have that standard of 440 Hertz, and then you know you're in tune with them. Okay, so I hope that was useful to you, and you learned more about Tabla Touch and what it can do, the scope of the instrument, and the functionalities. And I hope that Tabla Touch enables you to increase and widen the scope of your creativity and use the lovely sounds and the capabilities of tuning and MIDI connectivity in your music and celebrate the beautiful sounds of the tabla drum. Thank you very much for watching, and I hope to see you soon again.